She never imagined that her life would change at that very moment. The moment when her gaze met another man's eyes and her heart skipped a beat. When Lisa first saw Arthur dirty, hungry-eyed and in torn clothes, she felt a strange, irresistible attraction. It wasn't pity, it was a desire to break all bounds of decency, to spit on her family's expectations and throw herself into the arms of a guy whom society had long ago written off. No one could understand what it was that attracted her to this homeless man, but Lisa knew one thing. She was willing to risk everything for this wild, free, but lost man, and no force in the world could stop her.
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts, it's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes, dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
Lisa stood at the window, looking out at the evening landscape of the small provincial town. Her house was on the very outskirts of the town, next to abandoned buildings that no one had been interested in for a long time. Someone had entered one of those houses tonight. A careless rustle made her wary. At first she thought she had imagined it, but then she saw a boy, thin, tall, with untidy hair and rough features. He looked like he was from another world. His clothes were tattered and his hands were dirty. But something about his appearance drew Lisa's attention. Even at this distance, she noticed his eyes. They were dark, deep, as if they held an endless sadness and weariness. He didn't look like the typical inhabitants of their small Russian town. The guy seemed to have settled in the abandoned house across the street from her. Outwardly, he looked like one of those who had left home in search of a better life, but clearly hadn't found it. Lisa couldn't tear her gaze away for the first time in a long time. Something was really bothering her. Who is it? She whispered to herself, even though she knew no one would answer her. At night Lisa couldn't sleep for a long time, remembering the stranger's gaze. It seemed that this meeting meant more than just a coincidence. The next morning Lisa woke up with foggy thoughts. All day she tried to distract herself with routine activities, but every minute her thoughts returned to that guy. Who was he? Why was he here in this little forgotten town? Why had he chosen the abandoned house across the street? In the evening she went to the window again. And there he was again. Lisa couldn't stand it. She decided to go outside and walk past the house, pretending that she happened to be nearby. When she got closer, her heart began to pound frantically. The guy was sitting on the doorstep of the house with his head down, as if he didn't notice anything around him. She slowed her steps, trying to look as casual as possible, but in fact her inner state was far from calm. "Hi," she said quietly, stopping nearby. He raised his head and looked at her carefully. His eyes were tired and aloof, but at that moment Lisa felt an inexplicable connection between them. It was as if they were two lost souls who had accidentally found each other in this remote town. "Hi," he replied in a husky voice, his voice low, as if he hadn't spoken to people in a long time. Lisa felt her heart flutter again. "My name is Lisa. And you?" "Arthur," he answered briefly, squinting his eyes slightly as if he didn't trust her intentions. From that point on, their conversations became more and more frequent. Lisa began to bring him food and clothes, despite her parents' disapproval of her interest in the vagrant. Her family considered Arthur dangerous and unreliable, but Lisa couldn't resist what drew her to him. She sensed there was something more behind his outward stiffness that she wanted to uncover. As the weeks passed, Arthur became more than just a casual acquaintance. She began to spend more and more time with him. Every time they met, she could feel the tension growing between them, as if something inevitable was about to happen. One evening, when Lisa brought Arthur food again, she noticed how his gaze had changed. He was no longer aloof and cold. He looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time, attentive, with an interest that made her heart beat faster. "You come to see me every day," Arthur said, as if thinking. "Why would you do that?" Lisa froze. She could not immediately find an answer, because she did not fully understand what made her return to this strange, but so attractive guy. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I just feel like I need to be there for him. With you." Her words hung in the air, evoking conflicting emotions in Arthur. He pressed his lips together, as if holding back the words, but then he said quietly, "Do you know I'm a nobody? I have nothing. Not even a home. Why did you choose me?" Lisa took a step forward, feeling an invisible force pulling her toward him. She looked into his eyes and finally decided to answer. You are someone for me, Arthur. It doesn't matter to me who you were before or who you'll become later. All that matters is what's happening now. Her voice was confident, but at the same time trembling with tension. She realized that there was no turning back now. Something deep inside her told her that her life would never be the same again. Arthur looked at her with the same mixture of surprise and bewilderment. He was sure that people like her avoided people like him, the outcast, the lost, the homeless. But Lisa was different. He had risen from the threshold, and now they were within arm's length of each other. Arthur was taller. His figure looked lean but strong. Thick, careless dark hair fell over his face, but Lisa saw every gesture, every movement. She was drawn to him. His proximity sent shivers throughout her body. Suddenly Arthur stepped forward and took her hand. His touch was unexpectedly soft, yet firm. Lisa felt the warmth of his skin and the deep weariness that lurked behind his outward stiffness. Do you really want to be with me? His voice sounded almost desperate. Lisa didn't answer anything. She just stepped closer, feeling their bodies draw closer together. It was that moment when everything changed. She rested her head on his chest, feeling his heart beating as fast as her own. That moment was the beginning of their secret. Forbidden love that no one would understand. Several months passed. Lisa continued to meet Arthur in the abandoned house, hiding their relationship from family and friends. She realized that no one would have approved of her choice. The locals had long spread rumors about a down-and-out guy, living on the outskirts of town. Her parents were adamantly opposed to her associating with him. They considered Arthur a threat to her future. But Lisa couldn't stop. She became more and more immersed in this world the two of them had created. Every night they met in the abandoned house, and each time their bond grew stronger. Lisa felt that her love for Arthur was real and beyond reason. She could no longer hide it from herself. She was completely at his mercy. One evening, when Lisa returned home after another meeting with Arthur, her mother met her in the hallway with a serious look on her face. We need to talk, she said, and Lisa knew at once that something was wrong. Her mother looked at her with judgment, her voice stern and strained. You think we don't know who you're dating? The whole town is already whispering behind your back, she continued. That guy, he's no good for you. He can't give you anything. He's homeless, he has no future. Lisa remained silent, feeling the pain growing inside her. She knew her family would never understand her feelings for Arthur, but they hadn't even tried to get to know him. They didn't see what she saw: his vulnerable soul, his inner struggle. I love him, Lisa said calmly, though her heart was racing, and I will be with him no matter what. Her mother sighed, as if those words had taken away all hope. You're going to regret this. You don't realize what you're doing to yourself yet. But Lisa already knew that her choice had been made. She had chosen Arthur, and no amount of caution from her family or others could stop her. Lisa and Arthur continued to date despite growing pressure from her family and society. Time passed, and one day Lisa realized that a new life had begun inside her. She was pregnant. When she told Arthur about it, his face changed. Fear and uncertainty flashed in his eyes. Are you sure? He asked with difficulty, looking down at her belly. Lisa nodded. It wasn't a plan, but she felt it was their common path. Arthur was silent for a long time, digesting what he had heard. He didn't look happy, more concerned, even scared. Lisa tried to understand what was going through his mind, but his face remained hidden behind a mask of tension. Her heart clenched. She was afraid he wouldn't take this turn of events as she expected. Lisa, I don't know how I can be of any use to you, he finally said, looking her straight in the eye. I have nothing. I can't even help myself, and now you're telling me that we're expecting a baby? Lisa didn't look away, despite his hesitation. She knew that this decision was her choice, and she was ready for the consequences. It doesn't matter, Arthur, she said, feeling the confidence building inside her. I know you're not perfect, but I love you. We can do this together, even if everyone is against us. His eyes clouded over, as if he was struggling with some inner fear or guilt. Arthur wasn't ready for such a major change, but deep down he knew it had already happened. He leaned over slowly, touching her belly with his hand, and something warm and soft flashed in his gaze. "I'll do anything I can," he said softly. "For you. And for our baby." Lisa felt a wave of relief and joy. It was more than she could have expected. Arthur, despite his fears and doubts, was ready to accept this challenge. Even though there were many challenges ahead of them, at this moment Lisa was sure that they would be able to cope together. When Lisa announced her pregnancy to her parents, the house was filled with a heavy, depressing atmosphere. Her mother and father, who had always been concerned about her future, could not contain their anger and disappointment. Her mother, upon learning that Lisa was expecting a child with a homeless guy, was nearly speechless. "Are you serious, Lisa?" she exclaimed, clenching her hands into fists. "This guy. He's just a vagrant. What, you decided to destroy your life for him?" Her father was silent, his face stony, but Lisa knew he was furious too. Her mother continued, "You have no idea what you're going to go through. Your life is going to go down the drain, Lisa. And we're not going to watch it with our hands folded." Lisa was prepared for her parents not to accept Arthur, but she didn't expect how cruel and ruthless they would be. When she finally gathered her courage and announced that she was going to have the baby and moreover was going to bring Arthur to live in their house, a real storm broke out. The mother screamed first, her face pale with rage. She could hold back no longer. "Are you crazy, Lisa? This man is a nobody. He's just a homeless vagrant. He has no job, no normal background. He will drag you down. Do you want your life to be a nightmare? Do you want to have a baby with him? Do you have any idea how we're going to look to the people we know? How are you going to raise a child when the father is a man from the streets?" Lisa stood in front of her mother, gritting her teeth, trying not to show her pain. Every word hit her soul, but she knew she couldn't give up her decision. "Mom, that's enough. You don't know anything about him. Arthur is a good man. It's not his fault he's in this situation. He's just lost, but I believe we can work together to make things right." Her father, usually silent and calm, suddenly spoke. His voice was low and threatening. "Lisa, that man is nothing. He's just using you. How long will it be before he starts living off you? Do you really want your child to grow up in a family where the father is a bum?" He purposely said the last word with venomous contempt, and it hurt Lisa. She saw in her father's eyes not only anger, but also deep resentment. He was offended by her choice, offended that his daughter could tie her life to a man he considered beneath him. "Arthur is not a bum," Lisa shouted, feeling the rage boiling up inside her. "He lost his home, yes, but he's a human being. He has feelings, he has dignity, and you didn't even try to recognize him." Her mother couldn't help herself and literally exploded. "Dignity? He has nothing. No job, no family, no home. He's a burden. You don't know what it's like to carry a man like that. He'll ruin your life. You'll work 3 jobs while he sits on your neck. You'll raise a child alone because he's incapable of taking responsibility. Look at us, Lisa. We didn't put everything into you so you'd end up with that parasite." Her mother threw her such a scornful look that Lisa felt her legs buckle. She could barely hold back the tears, but she knew she had to resist. In that moment, memories of the nights she'd been with Arthur in the abandoned house came before her eyes. He had been lonely, broken, but he had never asked anything from her. He'd never complained or tried to use her. A parasite? Lisa clenched her fists so that her nails dug into her palms, but she didn't back down. "You talk about him like he's not human. You don't see him the way I see him. Yes, he has nothing, but it's only temporary. He deserves more than your humiliation and contempt." Her mother continued to scream, preventing her from saying a word. "You'll ruin yourself and your child. You will bring this tramp into our house? How dare you? We raised you, gave you the best, and you'll bring this one here. No, Lisa, that's not gonna happen. I will not let our family become a laughingstock." Her father, who had been standing silently by her mother's side, suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Lisa by the shoulders. His hands clenched tightly, and something dangerous burned in his eyes. "Lisa," he said slowly, almost threateningly, "you'll be making a huge mistake if you bring him here. We won't help you. You won't get a penny. You'll be left alone with this tramp and a child who will probably never see a normal life. Do you realize that?" Her head was spinning from the pressure, but Lisa could no longer back down. Her decision was final. I understand, she replied, breaking free of his grip. But I'm not asking for your help. I want to be with Arthur, and I will have this child no matter what you say. Her mother slammed her hand on the door in front of Lisa, as if putting an end to the conversation. If you leave with him, you don't have to come back here again. We don't know you. You're not our daughter anymore. Those words, like a knife to the heart, hurt Lisa deeper than anything she'd heard before. She was silent for a long time, inhaling deeply to hold back the tears. Inside, everything trembled with pain and fear. But there was no choice. She loved Arthur. She couldn't just betray him like she had betrayed others. All right, she said quietly, barely holding back her tears. I'm leaving now. Lisa turned back to Arthur, who was still in the abandoned house. He noticed her distressed look and his face darkened. He didn't need to ask questions. He understood everything from one look. They didn't accept us, did they? He asked, even though he already knew the answer. Lisa sat down tiredly next to Arthur on the old couch in the abandoned house, taking a deep breath to suppress the tears that were coming. Her shoulders slumped, as if under the weight of all that had been said. She shook her head, trying not to meet his gaze. They hate you, Arthur, she finally breathed out, her voice quiet but full of pain. Mom, Dad. They think you're nothing. They said I was destroying my life and that you would drag me down. They even offered to kick me out of the house if I chose you. Arthur looked at her carefully, his eyes darkening with heavy thoughts. He knew her parents would never accept him, but hearing that was much harder than he could have imagined. He felt unwanted, like a burden, just like they said he would be. But he couldn't afford to appear weak in front of Lisa. She had chosen him no matter what. I always knew I'd be a stranger to them, he said quietly, wrapping his arm around hers. Lisa, I don't want you to suffer because of me. If they're so against it, maybe you shouldn't. She cut him off abruptly, raising her head and looking straight into his eyes. Don't you dare say that, she said with a hint of anger, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I have made my choice. I love you, Arthur. I won't let anyone, not even my parents, ruin what we have. Her words, filled with determination, made Arthur freeze. He could see how hard this decision was for her, but she would not give up. Her love for him was stronger than any threat or pressure. Deep down, he admired her resilience, but at the same time he felt a deep guilt. He didn't want her to go against her family for his sake. But where will we live? He whispered, looking around the walls of the abandoned house, which looked even more depressing at this moment. It's impossible to stay here, especially with a child. Lisa wiped the tears from her cheeks and, taking a deep breath, answered decisively. We'll go to my house. Arthur raised a puzzled look at her. What do you mean, my house? You said they're against it. They're against it, but it's my home too. And I'm not going to hide anymore. Lisa clenched her teeth. If they want to kick me out, let them do it by looking me in the eye. But I won't back down. You're coming with me. Arthur was silent, his heart clenched with conflicting feelings. He did not want to be the cause of her conflict with her parents, but he realized that Lisa had made the final choice. It was too late to back out. When they returned to her house, Lisa knew there would be a scandal, but she didn't expect it to start on the doorstep. As soon as her mother saw that Lisa had brought Arthur, the house was in chaos. You brought him here, screamed her mother, her face red with anger, her eyes burning with rage. You dared to bring this tramp into our house. His father, standing nearby, gave Arthur a scornful look, as if he were mud on his shoes. He folded his arms across his chest and only said coldly, You've chosen your side, Lisa. And apparently now you'll live by its rules. Mom, Dad, I already told you. Lisa tried to speak calmly, although everything was boiling inside. I love him. I want us to be together. And you have to accept that. Accept it. Her mother literally snapped at a scream. Her voice was ringing with rage. You're out of your mind. This man doesn't even know what a job is. He can't provide for you or the child. He's just a parasite who will suck everything out of you. Lisa, clenched fists, tried to keep herself in control, but every word of her mother cut her like a knife. She couldn't believe how much her parents didn't understand her. You don't know what you're doing. Picked up her father, his voice icy. You think love will solve everything? It won't feed you, it won't put a roof over your head. You're growing illusions in yourself. This man will ruin you and your life. Arthur remained silent, clenching his fists, his face impassive, though inside everything was boiling. He realized that nothing he said could change their minds. They saw in him only what they wanted to see. A man with no future. A burden for their daughter. Lisa stepped forward, standing in front of Arthur as if to protect him. You're wrong. He's not what you think he is. Arthur is a good man and I believe in him. We'll get through this. We will. Mother laughed, but her laugh was full of anger. You're a naive girl if you think that's possible. You bring him into the house and everything goes downhill. We're not gonna let you ruin your life, Lisa. We won't let him live here. Lisa couldn't take it anymore and screamed back. This is my home too. And I have the right to decide who lives here. The words sounded so loud and harsh that the room was silent for a second. Her mother and father looked at Lisa stunned. They had never seen her so determined. But this was her choice. Lisa was ready to go all the way, no matter what the consequences. If you want to kick me out so badly, Lisa's voice trembled with emotion, but she wasn't going to give up. Then do it. But I'm not leaving Arthur. And I won't leave my child. Her mother looked at her with undisguised contempt, her eyes glittering with anger. You haven't given birth yet, and you're already talking about rights. You don't know what you're saying. You let that bum lead you astray. She pointed at Arthur as if he were an enemy, as if his presence was defiling their home. He will ruin your life, Lisa. We gave you everything, and you will repay us with such shame? Father, who had been silent until then, suddenly raised his voice, his cold judgment replaced by rage. You chose this path yourself. But no, Lisa, from now on we will not give you a penny. If you decide to continue with him, you can forget about our help. You will be responsible for everything yourself. Lisa pressed her lips together, feeling her heart clench with pain and resentment. She couldn't believe her parents were willing to give up on her so easily. But there was no choice. They didn't accept her decision, didn't see Arthur as she did. All right, she said, straightening her back. I'll manage on my own. I won't live off you anymore. You don't have to help me. But I have chosen my life, and I will live it as I see fit. Arthur, standing behind her, was ready to leave at any moment, realizing that something irreparable was about to happen. He did not want Lisa to break off relations with her parents because of him, but he already knew that there was no turning back. Lisa, are you sure? He asked quietly. His voice was full of concern and anxiety. I'm sure, she answered briefly, not taking her eyes off her parents. We will live together, Arthur. And I'm going to have this baby no matter what happens. Her mother and father looked at each other as if stunned by her determination. Her father stepped closer and said with cold anger, You'll regret it. When you don't have money for food or a hospital for your child, don't come to us. You have chosen your own fate. I have already chosen, replied Lisa, not retreating. The scandal did not subside in the house for several hours. The parents did not stop humiliating and blaming Arthur for everything that, in their opinion, happened to Lisa. They called him every possible word, insulted him, trying to make a dent in his self-control. But Arthur endured, even though he was seething inside. He knew that any word he said could only aggravate the situation. When evening came, Lisa and Arthur finally gathered their things and left the house, slamming the door behind them. Now they were alone, unsupported and without family. But Lisa was confident in her choice. We'll make it, she repeated, taking Arthur's hand. We'll make it together. After Lisa and Arthur left, they lived for a while in the abandoned house where Arthur lived. It wasn't an easy time. The roof leaked, the walls were covered with mold, and they wrapped themselves in old blankets every night. But despite that, they had each other. Lisa helped Arthur set up their temporary dwelling, and at some point this little den became a cozy home for them. A few months passed, and Arthur was finally lucky enough to get a job. He found a position with a construction company where he was noticed for his hard work and dedication. The earnings increased rapidly, and soon Arthur began to accumulate money. Every time he came home with his paycheck, his face lit up with pride. We'll be able to rent an apartment, he told Lisa as they dreamed of the future, sitting on an old sofa. Finally, they found a small but cozy apartment on the outskirts of the city. Arthur carefully arranged every detail, making Lisa feel comfortable. With each passing day, the moment was approaching when Lisa was due to give birth. Arthur was determined to provide the best for her and their future child. He began to prepare for this important event. He found very good doctors and even organized a separate room in the hospital. "I want you to feel as good as possible," he said, kissing her gently on the forehead. "You deserve that." Finally, the long-awaited day came. Lisa was in anticipation, but Arthur was there, supporting her and reassuring her. The time spent in the hospital passed in joyful excitement, and now that she and Arthur were parents, a new chapter in their lives had begun. Lisa's parents learned of their grandchild's birth and decided to come to the discharge, despite their previous quarrels and misunderstandings. They were full of anticipation but also anxiety, for there was a taut string between them and Lisa. When Lisa and Arthur came out of the maternity ward with a newborn in their arms, their parents, seeing the conditions in which they lived and how well settled, simply stunned. "Do you really live so well?" Lisa's mother asked, looking at their happy faces. Arthur, confident and proudly holding his son in his arms, replied, "Yes, we are doing great. We are happy." Lisa, noticing her parents' bewilderment, added, "We did it on our own. We are happy together." Her daughter's words struck a nerve with her parents. They saw Lisa and Arthur looking lovingly at each other and at their child, and their faces began to show signs of softening. "Forgive us," the mother said, holding back tears. "We were wrong. We shouldn't have judged you and your choices." The father, standing beside her, added, "Yes, we wanted the best for you, but now we see that you have found your happiness." The family atmosphere finally began to change. At that moment, Lisa felt all the resentments and misunderstandings that had been lingering between them begin to dissolve. Arthur looked at her and saw her eyes fill with tears of joy and relief. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "It means a lot to us." Some time passed after the birth of their son, and Lisa and Arthur's life began to get better. Arthur, having proved himself at work, was soon promoted. His skills and diligence did not go unnoticed. The management entrusted him with more responsible tasks, which led to an increase in his salary. Over time, he began to earn even more, and was able to provide his wife and child with all the best. Arthur rented a spacious apartment in a new area of the city, furnished it with quality furniture and appliances, not forgetting that Lisa was comfortable in her new status as a mother. Lisa was surrounded by care and attention. Arthur bought her everything she wanted, from beautiful clothes to the best baby care products. He arranged for a nanny when Lisa needed a vacation, and often pampered her with sumptuous dinners at restaurants. "I don't want you to need anything," Arthur often repeated as they sat together in the evening, tired but satisfied with the day they had spent with their son. However, despite the successes in his personal and professional life, for a long time Arthur could not let go of his resentment towards Lisa's parents. Remembering how they humiliated and despised him when he was at rock bottom, he felt bitter. Every time it came to talking about her family, all he did was brush off or express his displeasure. "I can't forget what they did to me," he told Lisa. "It's hard to just take it and forgive." Lisa, understanding his feelings, did not press Arthur, but it was hard for her to realize that there was still this invisible wall between them and her parents. She loved her parents and she wanted her family to be at peace. Over time, Lisa began to notice Arthur softening. They invited her parents to family dinners or children's parties more and more often, and they, seeing how Arthur had become a caring husband and father, also changed their attitude. Lisa's parents tried to establish contact, helped more often with their grandchild, and expressed their respect for Arthur. In the end, one evening changed everything. Arthur, holding his son in his arms, saw Lisa's parents looking at their grandson with sincere love and caring support for Lisa. He realized it was time to let go of the past for the sake of the family. "Lisa," he said one evening, "perhaps it's time to put a stop to this story. I can't say that I've forgotten everything that happened, but for the sake of you and our son, I'm ready to make peace with your parents." Lisa couldn't hold back her tears of joy. She knew how important it was for Arthur, and realized that this step was not easy for him. Soon they organized a family meeting where Arthur and Lisa's parents finally talked openly. Both apologized to each other for past offenses. "We've all made mistakes," Arthur said, "but now I want our son to grow up in peace and love. For his sake and for Lisa's sake, I am ready to leave everything behind. Lisa's parents sincerely thanked Arthur for his wisdom and willingness to reconcile. From that day on, the long-awaited peace reigned in their family, and Lisa finally felt that her family was truly united.